Good afternoon, everybody. We are live here. Happy Sunday afternoon. It's the only show clinically proven to be 73% effective. It's been 17 days since our last no-hitter. There's 288 players currently on IL, including 27 making their way back from Tommy John surgery. The Cubs record is 48-51, 10 games back of the guaranteed defaulter Milwaukee Brewers. Ronald Acuna is rostered in 44% of all NFBC leagues, even though he's had successful season-ending surgery. Joe Niekro's son, Phil Niekro's nephew, J.J. Niekro, was signed as undrafted free agent by the Atlanta Braves, and you are here with me in the dugout on this great Sunday afternoon. We already have a couple people in the chat room, and we've been doing this for 44 seconds. Even Lenny's here. We're going to talk about a few things here. Most of what we do on this day is we do a recap of the week when it comes to waiver wire, but the big stories of the week we have to touch on at least a little bit. And the one thing that was kind of odd was Yerman Mercedes said he was retired, then he came back. I guess that's good. I don't know what to make of it. Something deep is going on there that we don't know what it is. And I guess everyone's talking about Cleveland changing their name. And a lot of people are up in arms about it. I don't really care. I was a kid and I played football from fourth grade on. I played varsity football for my grammar school at eighth grade. And the first 2 years we were the Queen of Angels Blue Devils. Somebody said to the pastor, "Why is your team named the Devils?" And they just changed it the next night. We became the Knights. That was it. And I just said the name doesn't mean that much to you as their player, it's just who you play for. The truth is, I played Little League in the Indians farm system my entire career, so I hated the uniforms from way back. But it made me think of the other times teams changed their names. It was about 15, 20 years ago when in basketball, the Washington Bullets became the Washington Wizards. And even though I don't really like the Wizards name, everyone kind of understood why the Bullets had to change their name because, a lot of gun violence in the city of D.C. And I didn't think it went over as badly as this does, but we're in a different day and age. And then in baseball, just a few years ago, we had a name change. It was about 8 years ago. The Tampa Bay Devil Rays dropped the Devil and became the Tampa Bay Rays. And I believe that was done because of a group said that they probably shouldn't be named for the Devil, even though the actual aquatic fish that it's named after, I don't know if the fish, whatever species that happens to be, is actually called a Devil Rays. There's a lot of devils in the world of animals, like Tasmanian devils. I know there's a devil fish, but they changed it. They dropped the devils, and no one seemed to really get that big. So when they changed the name from Indians, people get upset. To me, it's just another name. If it offends 10% of the people watching the game, you probably shouldn't use the name. But that's, I'm the agreeable guy, and there aren't a lot of us left. So without further ado, I will move forward into the week that was. Andrew says, "See me?" I saw a couple people up there. I got 3 people watching on Facebook, which is good because last week at the very end, some total stranger came on with a comment and said, "Hey, I like what you're doing." And I said, "That's great. Come on back. Join the network over time." Anyway, I'll start with the return. We'll start with the positive side. We're going to start with people that returned from injuries in the past 7 days. So we welcome back Asdrubal Cabrera, Ender Inciarte, Ryan Weathers of the Padres, Brian Anderson of the Marlins, Jake Cave of Minnesota, Matt Duffy to Chicago, Alec Boehm to Philadelphia, Jose Trevino to Texas, Michael Franco to Baltimore, Jonathan Loaisiga to New York, Yankees, Odubel Herrera is back with the Phillies, Austin Nola is back with the Padres, Justin Upton is back with the Angels, Jeff Hoffman's back with the Reds, Austin Gomber's back with the Rockies, Tyler Clippard is back with Arizona, and Nola is back with Philadelphia. So both Nola brothers have come back this week. John Means is back with Baltimore. Hugh Darvish is back with San Diego. San Francisco does Buster Posey, and San Francisco Giants Kevin Gossman. It's slippery. Someone commented there that there's, if it's generally offensive, it should be that. You should be. It's just, somebody says it's a slippery slope. The one thing I wanted to mention was I'm a Florida guy, and I went to UCF. We're the Knights, which is functionally the equivalent among English mythology to what the Vikings are to Nordic mythology to what the Braves are to Indian mythology. They're the warrior class, and no one ever really got thought that. But to the north of us, where my first wife went, was Florida State, and they're the Seminoles. And I don't know, have you ever been to a Seminoles game? They're not going to change anytime soon. The Seminoles are a proud tribe. They're the only tribe that says that they were never defeated by the United States, which they weren't. When everyone was marched out of Florida, they stayed here. And at the beginning of the thing, they actually have a member of the Seminole Nation come out and riding a horse. The horse's name is Osceola. He throws down the gauntlet. It's actually quite a little ceremony. They actually have the approval of the Indians, of the Seminole Indians, to do this. The Seminole Indians are a big deal in Florida because they own the gambling rights to most of our casinos, including the casino that our friend Daniel Ferreira worked at. So I mean, you can do it with their consent, I imagine. But if you do it without, it's what is it saying? Like, I had a conversation about the word "own" that's used in fantasy baseball. Like I say, I own Javi Baez, right? And it doesn't have the same meaning as it does when a owner of a team says they own a player, because we're just doing representations, right? And it's like you can own things, but you can't own people, and that's where you can get to be offensive. You can be offensive when you're talking about making your moniker a people as opposed to a category or a thing, a true thing. Like, for instance, the Green Berets are made up of people, but they're just a thing. You know? And so the way I look at it is it's like, why would you want to offend anybody? And, they changed, and it also takes the history of the thing. I don't like the name Guardians, not because it's a bad name, but because it's not that good of a name, but because I thought there were better names for them. I thought going back to the Spiders would have been great. Spiders is a classic name. I played high school football for a team called the Rams, one of those classic names. There's nothing wrong with those classic names, and it has the history thing. I also like the Rockers because they've been young and fun. But it just seems to me that there's a group of baseball fans that would not be happy if they can't just get ticked off about something. I on one point, somebody posted on Facebook, a guy, a friend of George's, something about, hating the name of the Guardians. And I posted totally non-judgmentally. I said, the name Cleveland the name the Guardians has ties to Cleveland. They have these Guardian statues. That's all I wrote. This is not saying I like the name or dislike the name, just saying that's why they chose it. And he went on to say how, I'm a liberal, libtard, whatever. I was like, I just gave you a fact. I didn't say one way or the other. If you'd asked me, I'd say I don't really like the name. But you didn't. You just jumped on things because, well, that particular person is a hate stylist. He is phenomenal at these things. But all I did was point out a fact, and he went into a tangent. Anyway, because the question was why they choose the thing. And I go, this is why they chose it. That's what I put. That's a simple answer. But they're out there. They are, people got mad when they moved the All-Star game. They got mad when, I hear people get mad all the time when a player takes 3 days off to be with his wife during a pregnancy. People are just mad. That's a problem with us as a people. And I'm mad sometimes too. I'm mad at different things. I don't get mad at baseball. As much as I love it, I understand how important it is. And I spent the first 36 years of my life as a Chicago Cubs fan. I'm still a Chicago Cubs fan. But back then, it's like I knew I wasn't going to win. I still liked the team. Anyway, people are out recently. Max Scherzer has been scratched last night with a triceps issue. Eduardo Rodriguez left the game on Friday after 25 pitchers. The Boston management says they won't see the IL with that, but it's an unknown thing, something about a migraine. In St. Louis, Yadi Molina sat last night with a neck issue. In New York, Gary Sanchez missed last night with back spasms. Mookie Betts hasn't played in 7 games, even though they're not going to put him in the IL, with hip irritation. He has gotten a cortisone injection. But right now, if they could put him on the IL retroactive to 7 days ago, I think 7 is the maximum, actually. Even if you're out, if you don't play for 14, you can only do retro 7. LA Dodgers, Cody Bellinger missed last night's game, resting his hamstring. Cody Bellinger did. And Jeff McNeil missed past 2 games with a leg injury, and he will sit today for a third. The people actually went to the IL this week. What's this? Over half our. All right, sorry, I'm taking a moment. No, I don't have to hear this ever. No, there were business. The black folks in Atlanta wanted to keep it there because they thought it would highlight the problem with the state legislature trying to keep U.S. citizens from legally voting for no reason whatsoever. They thought it would highlight it more from being there. But that's what they were saying. Yeah, but they lost it. It's like any if a business if any kind of legislative grouping wants to pass a law that makes it inhospitable to the profitability or the morals of a particular company, the company has the right to move their game wherever they want. In Orlando, for instance. In Orlando, for instance, we passed a law via referendum to move our minimum wage up to $15 by, I think it's by 2026. And if at some point, people don't want to open their business in Florida because that's their prerogative, I don't think it'll stop them, mind you. 15 is so little about amount of money, but you wouldn't say that that's a big deal. It's only a big deal in this because it falls in that category. People just want to get mad about stuff. What did the law do to hurt voters? It did not make it easier to vote. It did not. They did a good job of writing the law in Atlanta, and I'll put it here: like, my ties to Atlanta are pretty strong. I lived in Atlanta for a year and a half, but I lived in the suburbs of Atlanta for another 12 years, mostly Norcross. I owned a home in Lilburn, which, if you know Atlanta jargon, there's ITP and OTP. I was OTP, but I was less than 2 miles OTP. I was right on the edge. And what they did was, in Gwinnett County, where I live, they removed seven drop-off boxes. Before, the law says they can only have one drop-off box. Before, Gwinnett, which is a very large county, has 170,000 people in it. They had a drop-off box at every one of their Department of Motor Vehicles. That's all they had. So, and the one at the voters. The main voter's office, the voter, whatever that's called. I don't remember what it's called. So that was 8. And, they're already guarded by state employees, never had a problem in the past. And that thing dropped it down to 7. Another thing they did in that law was they reduced the time that the polls had to be open from till 7 p.m. till 5 p.m., which I think that everybody would agree that if you have a 9-to-5 job and you're forced to work, and you're forced to vote in where you live as opposed to where you work, getting to a voting booth by 5 is an impossibility. Now, it doesn't make them do that, but it allows them to drop the thing down. And many places are going to, especially in spots. Like, that was voter suppression, fair and clear. I don't understand how anybody can't look at it and go, God, they just don't want U.S. citizens to vote. That's horrible. But I want to get back to baseball. But there were substantial things in that, just 2 of about 11 things in there. And the bigger part was there was absolutely no problem they're correcting. There are problems in Atlanta. There are problems in Georgia. This is not one of them. Just 2 years ago, they had that big scandal with Atlanta schools where, because the tests were so hard, the teachers were giving their it was actually, it's 4 years now because I lost 2 years with the pandemic. And that's never been corrected. They've been fined, but making the schools better for the students so that they do well on tests hasn't been addressed, partially because the pandemic came in the way, but there are real problems there. Voter fraud doesn't really exist. But anyway, to the IL this week, Arizona lost Josh Rojas with a left finger dislocation. Washington lost second baseman Jordy Mercer with left calf string. Miami lost starting pitcher Trevor Rogers with lower back muscle spasms. Luis Arias of the Twins was lost to right knee strain. Nick Castellano had a right wrist strain. Danny Jansen, catcher for the Blue Jays, has a right hamstring strain. John Berti of the Marlins was lost to a concussion. It's only a 7-day protocol. Isaac Paredes, Detroit's prospect, who's playing second base this time around, was lost to a right hip sprain. I think he actually came back yesterday. I got to double check that. Danny Santana, Boston's outfielder, has a left groin strain. Danny Duffy has a left leg strain for Kansas City. So does Brady Singer, their other sharp pitcher, not a left leg strain, but he has right shoulder fatigue. Baltimore lost Anthony Santander and Keegan Aiken to COVID. Aiken was a guy that I was going to recommend this week. JP Fireeisen of the Rays lost to right shoulder discomfort. Alex Kirilov had a right ligament tear. He's probably done for the season. Danny Duffy has a left flexor strain. No timetable when he's caught up. I have him in my league. I'm probably going to drop him because I think I get somebody better in that spot. New York Yankees' Trey Ambergay is out with a right hamstring strain. I'm only saying that because Trey Ambergay is one of those names that's just fun to say. In Colorado, one of the guys that's big on Chris Owings has a mallet finger of his left thumb. I'm still big on him. If you take out his pinch hit abilities, he was 5 for 10 when he was starting for them until he went out with his mallet finger. And the problem with the mallet finger is there's only two options. One is to play through it, and the other option is to re-break your finger and get it to heal correctly. And if he re-breaks his finger, he's out for another 60 days and his season's over. So as much as Owings was poised to do something special in Colorado, it's not going to happen this year. I'm not going to say I was wrong about him because he really just didn't play, and that's not something you can predict. Garrett Cooper is out in Miami with a left elbow sprain. Jazz Chisholm, left shoulder contusion to the IL. Alex Manoah had a right back contusion, and Brandon Crawford a left oblique strain. A couple of 60-day moves, just guys that I sort of liked a little bit and was keeping an eye on. Kyle Garlick of Minnesota got moved to the 60-day with a sports hernia. David Peterson, the pitcher for the Mets, went to the 60-day with right side soreness. Soreness knocked you out 60 days. That's pretty amazing. God, I have to go through this. It says, does it disfranchise voters to remove drop boxes? It does. If they're voting in a way where there's absolutely no problem whatsoever, and all they're doing is they're taking it in at DMVs rather than you have to drive to pre-vote. Gwinnett County is a big county. The county seat's in Lawrenceville. To give you an idea of how big the county was, when I met my third wife, we met at church in Norcross, which is in Gwinnett County. I was living in Lilburn. She was living in Decullo. We both lived in Gwinnett County. It was an hour and 20-minute drive from my house to her house. We didn't see each other on weekdays because it was just too far to go. That's how big that freaking county is. And to make somebody who lives in Decullo drive an hour in to Lawrenceville main office, or actually, that's probably all highways, so it's probably like 40 minutes, or for me to come out for an hour to be the one spot rather than me go to the Norcross DMV if I was pre-voting, that's fine. Now, if there was a problem with pre-voting, which there absolutely was not, you might go, let's change that a little bit, make it a little bit more protected. But it was at a place that was always monitored by state employees. Anyway, they do that here in the county I live in, Seminole County. They do that too. They just do it at the libraries. But it's the same sort of thinking. And almost nobody sets up boxes in the middle of a park. You might find one somewhere. So anyway, the rehabs are good to hear because these are people that are coming back relatively shortly. Starting pitcher Miles Mikolas is rehabbing in Memphis. Tommy Malone, not that you'd want him, he's rehabbing in Buffalo for Toronto. Nick Anderson, who I drafted in one league, is with the Florida FCL Braves. What does the C stand for? It stands for, well, whatever it was. It used to be the FSL, the Florida Instructional League, but it's the same sort of concept, but it's sort of like low A. Anderson's going to low A. Michael Fulmer is rehabbing in Toledo for the Tigers. Reyes Moronta in Sacramento for the Giants. Carson Kelly in the Arizona Central League. It's a Central, whatever they call it, ACL Diamondbacks. Manuel Margot is somebody you should look for. He's rehabbing with Durham. Tommy La Stella is rehabbing with Sacramento. If he comes back, it throws a little bit more into that very potent but very confusing San Francisco Giants situation. We did lose the one Minnesota outfield, but Rob Rebschneider is rehabbing in St. Paul. The big ones this week, of course, are Chris Sale, Luis Robert, and Carlos Carrasco. But there's also Mike Brousseau of the Rays, Jordan Luplow of Columbus, and Almeida Diaz of Houston, who they were using in a lot of different spots. My negativity. There were a couple trades this week. Tampa Bay traded starting pitcher Rich Hill to the Mets for catchers Matt Dyer and Tommy Hunter. Tommy Hunter is a pretty decent relief pitcher, and he kind of fits into the mold of what you think of him as a Rays reliever. I don't have any negativity whatsoever. I mean, I do. I'm pro America and that stuff, pro voting rights. I don't think that's negative. Tampa Bay traded Drew Stroman and Joe Ryan for Nelson Cruz. That's a weird thing for the Tampa Bay, because on one end they were a trader trading Rich Hill. On the other end, they were acquiring Nelson Cruz. One of the things that I know that Rays were slipping of late, but one of the things that made them really good was the fact they have this great flexibility. Now they have a player that's only DH. I mean, you can never say no to a guy who is as good as Nelson Cruz, but I think that Tampa Bay is among the worst fits for Nelson Cruz. Everybody could use him, but he's among the worst fits for Nelson Cruz. Like, for instance, Nelson Cruz would have been a bad fit in the Yankees because they already have too many DHs already. He'd be better than all of them, but it would push a lot of guys to the bench or make their outfield really bad. And then the New York Mets also traded Billy McKinney to LA Dodgers for outfielder Carlos Rincon, who's a little bit further away. McKinney actually started for them. That's how I still stand by the idea that the LA Dodgers are doing everything in their power to come in third place in that division. And that's where they're going to wind up. So those are the trades. So let me get to the recommendations here. And the one thing, I'll go through these are the quick notes. Miami recalled Braxton Garrett. Cincinnati recalled Vladimir Gutierrez. Cincinnati full-on release Jose Delon, who used to be a big deal coming out of the Dodgers and the Tampa Bay systems. New York Yankees activated Nestor Cortez. He might be a 2-star guy next week. Pittsburgh optioned Max Kranick of the perfect 5-inning start. Atlanta optioned Bryce Wilson after he pitched. Tampa Bay recalled Luis Patino. Cleveland optioned Eli Morgan, so they're going to be scrambling for stuff in their thing. Detroit recalled Matt Manning. Philadelphia recalled Spencer Howard, though I think he's going into the bullpen. Seattle selected the contract of, I might be pronouncing this wrong, Darren McCaughan. That's MC Mick, big C Aughan. I think it's McCaughan. But he came in after one of the pitchers pitched one bad inning, and then he pitched 4 solid innings, enough that he's going to get a start next week. And if things work out, he'll get 2 starts. His first start's versus Houston, which isn't exactly the best matchup in the world. So might knock him out. The second start is versus a much lesser team. But he's a guy that he's going to come up in my should I pick him up for $1 segment. Miami recalled Nick Neidert for a game, then they optioned him back down. LA Dodgers recalled Josiah Gray. Josiah Gray has a good matchup coming up this next week, but I don't think he goes 4 innings. So even with the at Arizona game, I don't think he's worth while. Arizona recalled Tyler Widener. I think he was just down for a moment, just like Kyle Muller was recalled by the Atlanta. And the Mets selected the contract Anthony Banda. Those are the notes there. I'm going to give you starting in the real Shallow Eggs in Yahoo. There's a lot of guys here, and now admittedly, there's a group in between that isn't going to really be talked about because you got to be pretty darn good to be. You got to be pretty good to be a starting pitcher in a 12-team league. You can't be. Whereas it might be worthwhile to talk about somebody like McGaughan in a 15-team league. And he might be pretty good. He might actually have a better outing than a lot of guys that are rostered. That's not the kind of guy that you pick up here. Because these are the names that are available. Rich Hill, traded to the Mets, actually went down from the point. I actually think that's an upgrade for him. He gets to pitch to a pitcher. Plus, I think the Mets ballpark is actually better for pitchers. And I know that not playing the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Blue Jays has got to be a good thing. So Rich Hill, if he's available, I know it's only 1 under my minimum of 50, but it is a thing. Jake Odorizzi, 44%. David Price, 44%. Those guys have been talked about in the past. Shane McClanahan, his last outing, they did let him pitch a little bit more, so maybe they're not doing that 4-inning thing to him, which brings him back to the grouping. A couple guys, Jameson Tynes had a good, solid 2 weeks with the Yankees with a .98 whip over 2 games, 11 Ks in 18 innings, 1.47 ERA. It's a big question. Who else is pitching in New York? And Tyon seems to have taken up the mantle. I'm not going to give him my full-throated recommendation, but he's a guy you might play for a week or two while things are going. Patrick Sandoval looks good. with the Angels, and he'll be one of the guys that I recommend. 31% owned, 2.87 ERA, 0.57 WHIP over the last 2 weeks. He's actually the big thing, and this is the hard thing to find in the cut pile, is guys that have starting pitchers with really good strikeout rates. Over the last 15.2 innings, he struck out 22. That puts him in a more elite status, and he should be there. So the three guys that I'm going to recommend are Rich Hill, David Price, and Patrick Sandoval. There are other guys worth looking at that are available. Mike Minor is at 22%. He's kind of the low end. Ryan Weathers at 26%. Logan Webb of the Giants at 23%. Tyler Meagle at 23%. I know a lot of people really love him a lot, and I do too. But like I said, if in a 12-team league where a team is rostering 7 pitchers, you got to be pretty darn high to make it. And I don't think he's quite at that yet. The better matchup, sure. And Merrill Kelly has kind of shockingly has a 3.26 ERA and a 0.88 WHIP over his last couple starts, and that's on a horrible Arizona team. So as you find that in the deeper leagues, there's not a lot going on there, but there's some names to look at. And most of these guys are almost not owned at all. Like Willie Peralta, he's 42% owned in that thing. He had a bad outing versus Kansas City, which I'll take that thing. Like I said that one of the things I'm going to do in these deep leagues is I'm going to talk about picking guys for one matchup. My third recommendation will always be that. And I kind of screwed up last week. These are what I said are the good matchups. Arizona, anytime you play Arizona, especially when Arizona's away. Seattle, anytime you play Seattle, especially when they're at home. Texas, Miami, Pittsburgh. Detroit versus lefties are at home. That means not versus righties away. Kansas City is not at home versus righties. And I recommended Willie Peralta last week. And he was at home versus a righty. He was a righty facing them at home, and of course he got let up for 5 runs. So I'm still going to take the loss on that, but it's because I screwed my own rules up. Cleveland anytime, New York Mets especially at home, Colorado away, Baltimore away, and versus right-handers. Atlanta versus lefties or away. The Angels when they're away. Milwaukee versus lefties. St. Louis pretty much anywhere. St. Louis pretty much anywhere, but especially versus lefties. Tampa Bay, Rays at home. Cincinnati versus lefties in Chicago when they're away. Those are the ones where, based on strikeout rate and OBP and WRC plus, those teams do poorly in those situations, and you can do pretty well with that. To give you an idea, I'll give you the tracking. What we've had so far, even with the bad week this week. I had Willie Peralta, Alec Mills, Eric Fetty, and Taylor Widener, right? So for the week, that's 24.4 innings pitched, 22 strikeouts, no wins, 2 losses, a 4.80 ERA, a 139 WHIP, and an 8.11 K per 9. Find that with Brad Keller, Charlie Kill, and Vince Velasquez the week before. My yearly thing through 41.6 innings is a 3.03 ERA, a 1.13 WHIP, 8.22 K per 9. Which isn't the greatest K per 9 in the world, but like I said, these are hard to come by. If I can get that close to 9, that's a win in my book. So, so these are the names. I said, well, Chris Bubich is 40% owned. He's had 2 good outings versus bad teams. Jose Suarez of the Angels, 32% owned. He does pretty good with strikeouts, but he's had off outings only versus good teams, Oklahoma and Boston. Jake Woodford pitched for St. Louis. He had a nice game for Chicago, 3 runs in 5 innings. Not exactly my favorite, but it's just to be mentioned. Matt Harvey, 2% owned, has had 2 consecutive scoreless outings versus Washington, KC. Touki Toussaint had a nice outing versus San Diego. I've always liked Touki Toussaint, and ever since I see him pitch in high A ball, and I just like saying the name. Paulo Espino of the Nationals. I spent all this time screwing around with Nationals pitchers, and sometimes it was like, well, they got Espino coming up in Ross. I'm going to take Ross. They got Espino coming up in Reddy. I'm going to take Reddy. I'm going to take Fetty. Sorry. But it turns out that in 54 innings this year, Paulo Espino has a 3 ERA, a 1.04 WHIP, and 32 Ks. He's probably the guy that we should have been targeting, or that I should have been targeting and recommending all along. Then you have Spencer Watkins, who we talked about last week, and Braxton Garrett came up for 1 game, used to be a high prospect for Miami. I know what Miami does. They seem to find these guys out of nowhere. I know that one game's a small sample size, but I'd rather be ahead of the curve than behind. So my 3 recommendations are Paulo Espino, Spencer Watkins, Braxton Garrett. Now, when we look at the what I call the scrub pitcher tracking, the worksheet for this week, these are the teams. These are the players that have low ownership that are playing bad teams this week. Keegan Aiken was going to have a game, but he's on the COVID list. J.A. Happ has a game versus Minnesota, but I'm going to pull that one out because he's been bad. He's been pretty bad of late, even versus bad teams. Jose Suarez is 3% owned in NFBC. He's got the game. His opponent is Colorado at home. Colorado is coming off a homestand. Jose Suarez is the guy I'm going to put in that recommendation slot. The next guy on the list is Jordan Lyles, who's not very good, but he does have the greatest thing possible, which is he gets to play Arizona at home, facing off versus Madison Bumgarner. Madison Bumgarner will also make this list, facing off versus Jordan Lyles. I don't think that I would recommend Jordan Lyles, but he's the number 4 on my list. Bryce Wilson is going to pitch one of the 7-inning doubleheader games versus the Mets. He would be a guy I'd recommend, but I think it's just limited to that, and he might not make it through 5 innings. Brett Anderson of Milwaukee is going to face Pittsburgh against Matt Krenick on Wednesday. He's been a pretty decent pitcher, not a guy that we would not see. Taylor Widener was recalled up. He's 20% rostered. He gets to play Texas versus Dane Dunning on Tuesday. He's going to be another one I recommend. I'm recommending Suarez and Widener so far. Spencer Watkins on this list. I think that it's unfair for me to recommend him because I'm recommending him on the other side as a full-on play. But the truth is he's got Detroit on Friday in Detroit versus Tarek Skubal. Nestor Cortez, who we mentioned, was called up. Looks like he's going to pitch Monday and Sunday. He's got that first game versus the Rays and the second game versus the Marlins. That might be a bad matchup. My second, and I don't believe I'm doing this, but I am going to recommend Matt Harvey as my. So it's going to go Jose Suarez, Matt Harvey, Taylor Widener are the 3 that I'm recommending. He's a right-hander. He's going to play Detroit in Detroit versus Matt Manning, who probably won't go deep in that game. Matt Harvey has pitched 2 scoreless innings. If this system has any merit whatsoever, Matt Harvey's going to do well. If it has no merit, he's not going to do well. And that's it. You do have Josiah Gray's got that 1 outing on Saturday versus Merrill Kelly in Arizona. If I thought he could pitch 5 innings, I would take it, but I don't think so. Doesn't mean I don't think he'll probably do something like 3 innings with like 6, 7 strikeouts, which might be worthwhile in some formats. Then they have 2 2-star pitchers I can't recommend because I can't recommend both starts. There's that Darren McGaughan of Seattle. He's got the game on Monday versus Luis Garcia against Houston. That probably could be bad enough to knock him out for the week. The second week, if you can make the second one, the second game is Texas versus Dane Dunning. That's a good matchup. Between the 2, you might get something pretty soon. The other one is the returner Jeff Hoffman to Cincinnati. He plays his first game against Chicago in Chicago, which isn't the best place in the world. And the second game, he gets to play the Mets in New York, which is a good place to go. But anyway, so that's the Jose Suarez, Jordan Lyles, Jose Suarez, Tyler Widener, Matt Harvey are my 3 recommendations there with a little nod to Jordan Lyles. So that's Garrett, Watkins, Espino, and just for the week, those are the 3 guys. In outfield, a lot has happened. Chicago, fresh off of claiming Frank Schwindel from the A's, has claimed Janish Fargas off the waivers from the Mets, which is horrible for the future of the Cubs. Minnesota were called Brett Rooker. Tampa Bay optioned Vidal Brujan to Durham. Boston were called Franchi Cordero. The Angels optioned Taylor Ward to Salt Lake. Taylor Ward actually played long enough that he's kind of figuring it out and doing pretty good. He had a little bit of, if you take out like the first two weeks of his run at thing, he was actually hitting about 280 with some home runs, some steals. The fact that they sent him down to make room for Justin Upton means that the next call-up is going to be Joe Adell because they're not keeping space. They're not, whatever they've seen from Ward, they've seen enough. He did well enough to stay with the club over some of the other guys. Either that or I could be reading it wrong. It could mean they're completely in love with Adam Eaton. I don't know how you could be that. Philadelphia option, Mickey Moniak, the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, right? Baltimore recalled Ryan McKenna. Detroit outright released Nomar Mazara, which creates some breathing room in the outfield in Detroit. Miami option Monty Harrison. Justin Upton returned from IL, is batting third. Brandon Marsh is playing center field, batting sixth. They're not behind catcher Max Stassi. And LA is preferred enemy to Taylor Ward. George Springer is back to leadoff in Toronto. In Chicago, Rafael Ortega has batted leadoff 3 of the past 4 games as center fielder. And he might make my deep league recommendations because of that. Atlanta, Chuck Pearson batted leadoff. He's been hot, raising his average up to 237, his OBP to 300. Woohoo. Washington, Victor Robles is sitting for Andrew Stevenson in center field with Gerard Parro and right. In San Diego, it seems like Trent Grisham is the leadoff hitter, not Tommy Pham. Of course, Tommy Pham leads off versus lefties. Pittsburgh's cleanup hitter is Ben Gamel, like it or not. Nelson Cruz acquisition moves Meadows to the outfield. And the people who lose time in the Rays is Brett Phillips, who we'd like, who's probably not worth anything here, and Yandy Diaz. Boston, Jaron Duran was given 2 days off consecutively versus lefties. Cincinnati's Aristides Aquino got 3 starts in the outfield, batting fourth with Castellanos out, hitting 2 home runs. Victor Reyes benefits from Mazara race. He's batting 9th, but he could move up if he does something there. And Minnesota's Jake Cave, who's been activated, should move right into the center field position there. In the shallow leagues, in the Yahoo leagues, there are some pretty good players available there. I mean, Robbie Grossman is like ranked number 125 overall for the year. He has 15 home runs and 12 stolen bases. Sure, he's batting 200 on the year, but he's got a decent enough on-base finish to stay in the game. And I can't believe that many home runs, stolen bases to their use to somebody. We did mention Aristides Aquino if you're looking for a short-term fill-in. I wish he could get more play, but in the short stint, filling in for Castellano, he's 5 for 17 with 2 home runs, and he's only 2% rostered. Odubel Herrera is back from the IL. Looks like he's taking over the center fielder spot, and he's a guy that was good enough to be rostered everywhere before his injury. Probably is still again, but the big one is Andrew Vaughn seems to be figuring it out. The home runs still haven't come the way he wants, but he's bet over last week's hit 324 with an OPS over 1,000. The other guy I kind of like is Harrison Bader. I think he's the St. Louis center fielder. He's got the chops to field center field, but we're hoping that he figures out how to hit a little bit. He's hit 419 over the last 2 weeks. Admittedly, we do expect him to steal a little bit. He hasn't stolen any bases in that period, but I think there's better things for him. Don't look now, but Hunter Dozier over the last 2 weeks has hit 478. There's no home runs, no stolen bases, but he still hit 478. Cole Alhoun is 10% owned. Outfielder Jaron Duran. There are 3 guys in the deep leagues that are rookies that people have just sort of given up on relatively quick. And they're under 50% threshold. But I can see picking up any one of these guys. Jaron Duran's 49% rostered. Jared Klenick's 47% rostered. Brandon Marsh is 21% rostered. Alex Kirilloff is 17% rostered. I like Duran and Kirilloff the best. I think Kirilloff's the best talent of the 4. I think Duran, I can't believe that it's fallen off that quick. He's only been up for a week. And then I like Brandon Marsh and Klenick well enough. I'll take what he can get. In the deeper leagues, the guys that I would say, the guys I'm recommending are Andrew Vaughn, Odubel Herrera, and I still like Cole Calhoun. If you're looking for a short-term thing, you can't do much better than Aristides Aquino, though admittedly that day is over when Castellanos returns because they're married to Castellanos and Winker in the outfield, and none of these guys can really play center. Nagowski is a guy that I like in the deeper leagues. When I recommend somebody in the deeper leagues, it doesn't mean you can't try him in the shallow leagues because, a home run's a home run, and when a guy's hot, you just feel kind of funny recommending that stuff. It's like, why would I recommend Nagowski to you when you could get Andrew Vaughn or Cole Calhoun or Jaron Duran? But Nagowski is definitely somebody that I recommend in the deeper leagues because he's got the playing time and he's doing what he can do. In the outfield in the deeper leagues, Brandon Marsh is 2% owned. I know that he's not hit a home run. He's only hitting 5 for 23. He's up there, but he's better than that, and I think it'll come around. You can't expect everyone to hit right out of the gate. It does require a little patience. Ben Gamel of the Pittsburgh Pirates, along with your buddy Nagowski, he's been hitting 323 with 4 runs for the month of July, and he's batting fourth for that team. He's definitely somebody that I'm not just recommending. I have a need on my 15-team team for somebody who's playing right now, and he's my number one choice. I'm also going to recommend Rafael Ortega of the Cubs. He's been leading off more than you think. Probably a little bit under the radar, but the Cubs really needed they've needed a leadoff hitter since Dexter Fowler left in 2016. He's hitting 273. He doesn't walk a ton, but he's got enough walks that keeps his on base over 310. He's got 2 home runs, 3 stolen bases in 2021. So he's can add at every other thing. Greg Allen is very similar, but he bats down the lineup. He probably has less power, more stolen bases of the Yankees. I do like Victor Reyes. Lenny, Marsh, or Odell? There's a great question. I'm gonna go through these last names real quick, and I'll get right back to that. Victor Reyes is coming back. He's a guy that, with regular playing time, is much like Grossman, a threat for 2020. Tyrone Taylor of Milwaukee is hitting 368 since return from IL. Return from being sent down. And whatever's been asked of Tyrone Taylor, he's done. He's just a name that no one likes. There are a couple of deeper names like Tchaikovsky, Daniel Johnson, Tony Kemp, Darren Ruff, Orlando Garcia. What's going to do? Who do you like better, Marsh or Odell? That is a really good question. The first thing I got to say is sometimes you're biased toward the players you can get. And I have Odell in one league, and I have Brandon Marsh in a league. So I watched these guys a little bit closer than that. I think that for this year, I think Brandon Marsh is going to be the better player. I don't know if that's going to hold true for the rest of their careers. What they're doing with Odell is they're scared. They have a guy who's the former number 1 overall prospect, and they know what happens to former overall prospects. They either become pretty good like Mike Trout or Will Myers, or they follow this different path. And, it brings to mind Jerkson Profar. And Jerkson Profar got, he played some mental game in the minors, didn't do that well. When he got called up, he didn't do that well, and it took him years to just become useful. And I think that they're really scared of ruining what they might have in Odell. And I don't think Odell is going to get pulled up until they can say to him, do whatever you can do. There's no pressure whatsoever. We're not playing for anything anymore. So I don't think it'll be that deep, and I think it might take him a little time to get through. And when he comes up, the first thing he's going to be is he's going to be a power-hitting outfielder with a lot of strikeouts and a low batting average. Kind of best case scenario, an Adam Duvall type. Whereas I think Marsh can be Marsh. I don't think he will hit 300 because there's a difficulty in hitting in the majors, but he's a guy that I think can hit above league average. The 269, 275 area, and contribute in more than one spot. I like Marsh more than Odell, and then you throw in the fact that Marsh is going to be playing starting this week, and Odell is not going to be playing until probably the last week of August, maybe middle August. The extra time is going to make Marsh be the better choice. So I'm going to take Marsh in that. My recommendations here for this deeper leagues are Ben Gamel and Aristides Aquino with my number 3 guy. Just what I just said to you, it's like I'll take the upside of Brandon Marsh. What's up with Darren Ruff? That's good between the thing. There's a lot to like about San Francisco Giants. And as I said before the season, I thought that they might surprise everybody. I didn't think they'd win the division. I thought they'd come in second. But they have these interchangeable parts. And it's like, I don't know if you heard a couple weeks ago, I talked about, there are 2 teams that are winning. And it's kind of the reasons they're winning are different. I took the White Sox. The reason the White Sox are winning is because they have the best pitching staff in baseball, and nobody's talking about that. The guys just, every one of those guys just comes out, pitches well. None of them have been injured, and that's propped them up. Admittedly, the rest of the division is pretty bad. San Francisco is winning because they have no superstars, but everybody on their roster produces something. Their biggest star player is Buster Posey in name alone, and their biggest star player in production is probably Brandon Crawford is currently injured. But when Brandon Crawford gets hurt, they just pop in Tyra Estrada and they get most of what they had before. And they still have Wilmer Flores backing up and Jason Vossler backing up Evan Longoria and Latimia Silla coming back, backing up Donovan Solano at second base. And I can't remember who the other second baseman is. And they have Brandon Belt and Lamont Wade and Darren Ruff at first base. If I had my druthers, I'd rank them Belt, who's injured, Ruff, who doesn't get to play, Lamont Wade. I don't know why they like Wade so much. My guess is among the players that we talk about on this team, the same thing between their outfield with interchange. Alex Erickson comes in, Steven Duggar comes in. It doesn't matter. They play just well enough to keep them winning. So when somebody gets injured in San Francisco, it's like it doesn't hurt them. Anyway, I think they like Lamont Wade's capacity to take a walk. And so of the guys on that team that are healthy right now, he makes more sense as a leadoff hitter than anybody. I think Ruff's a better hitter overall, but Ruff is probably a 5 hitter, with a little bit more home run stuff, whatever. And so that's what it is. I like Darren Ruff. I'd recommend him. If you're playing, I'd recommend him everywhere. But you can't trust on – and I know that Andrea out there loves Wilmer Flores too. The only thing about Wilmer Flores that even she would say that she didn't like is it sucks to look at the lineup and see that he's occasionally not in it. And you got to say that's true with everybody in that lineup. There's not a single player in that lineup that plays all the time. Now if you need a replacement for something you lost, or if you're in a really deep league, 4 days of somebody is worthwhile. Get there, and I do like the Giants overall. So those are my recommendations are Aquino in the short term, Gamble, and I put Marsh down as my third. Even though I had not decided that until right now, because I was going to recommend Victor Reyes, but I'll take the upside of Marsh because it's just what I talked about. And at first base, here we are at 145, which is about right. Texas selected the contract of first baseman Curtis Terry from AAA Round Rock. He was hitting 294 with 17 home runs and 235 at bats, and he's going to get the shot to play in there, much like Andy Ibanez is at third base. Kansas City option Ryan McBroom in Omaha. I was behind that when he pulled him up, but apparently it didn't work out. Colorado recalled Connor Joe. Connor Joe seems like a joke in most of our leagues, but the truth is he's as good when he's hitting in Coors Field, he's as good as CJ Cron is. Greg Allen with the Yankees. Yeah, I mentioned him before. Greg Allen is on that list. I would rather have – who did I say I'd rather? I'd rather have Ben Gamble. I would rather have Rafael Ortega. But he's in that same category. He's a guy that I understand we have to pick up. He's in the – I have many levels of recommendation. The first one is you got to go out and get him right now. The one is my full-throated recommendation. The first one is I recommend him. The fourth one is I understand it. I would say Greg Allen is a worthwhile thing. He's not a long-term fix, but ride it while it's hot. And none of these guys that are in that third or fourth tier really are guys I'm saying park for the rest of the year. In Oakland, Mitch Moreland sat twice versus lefties. I like him, but I'm not even going to recommend him anymore because Oakland's just jerking him around. If he doesn't play, he isn't there. Toronto has moved around their lineup. They moved Springer to first, and it looks like Vlad Guerrero has moved from third to second, which still makes Vlad Guerrero good, but it means that he's going to shift more to being a run-scored guy from a runs-driven-in guy, which is fine, especially considering the balance of the year. It might actually make his end-of-the-year numbers look really good in Roto. In Milwaukee, first baseman Rowdy Tellez started the past 2 days. It has been hot. Hit a home run. In San Francisco, first baseman Lamont Wade has led off 5 of the last 6 games. I actually made a note to compare that to Darren Ruff. And Pittsburgh's first baseman is John Nogowski, and he's playing all the time and doing what you expect from that. At first base, we have Andrew Vaughn, who is also available in the outfield. He's a guy that it's a shame that should be there. Joey Votto, since the All-Star break, has been hitting pretty much what you expect from Joey Votto. The average is a little bit lower, but the power's there. Everything's there. Those are 2 guys that should be on teams. At 16%, we have Wilmer Flores, which we already talked about. San Francisco situation. When he plays, he's fine. He has the power. CJ Cron is a perfectly fine pickup, but he's only really good in Colorado. Outside of Colorado, he's a 210 hitter. And now scroll up, I still believe in the upside of him. But Andrew Vaughn and Joey Votto are 2 guys that should be rostered in the shallower Yahoo-type leagues. At third base, it's getting more – so let's do this thing first. In the deeper leagues at first base, you have J-Man Choi is 20% rostered. He's hit 293 last week with 3 home runs in the past 2 weeks, and he's batting second for Tampa. That's a guy that's worthwhile getting. John Nogowski at Pittsburgh is 24% rostered. Every week he's with Pittsburgh. Every week with Pittsburgh, he's hit 300 or better. It's not like he had one hot week. He's always been doing it. You can't knock that if you need a player that's a guy to get at first base. And he had his first homer this week, and his slugging is nearly 500 with the team, even though he hasn't hit home runs. There's enough extra bases to prop that up. Just in points like Harold Castro is a guy that I bring up every week as being sort of a batting average play. And then we talked about Rowdy Tellez being somebody you might pick up. There are 3 guys that I sort of like that play first base, which include Darren Ruffin, Mitch Moreland, and Phillip Evans, but make sure that they're playing before you make any move that way. At third base has been a tough thing this year. This has actually been one of the better spots, better weeks for recommendations third week. Last time Andrew was here, she said, "How are you recommending Brock Holt?" And I said, "It's because there's garbage at third base. He's probably the best bet. At least he's playing and he's leading off." But interesting, in Yahoo leagues, when you go through the list of the people are being rostered, when you get to Gio Urshela, who's rostered in 68% of leagues, the next third baseman down on a list is 39% rostered. There's this huge drop in the middle of players that nobody wants. And that 39% guy is Miguel Sano, who is a player that almost nobody wants, and I won't be recommending him. But it gives you an idea how there's really have and have-nots at third base. None of these picks I'm super fond of, except for Nico Horner at 16% rostering with the Cubs. Heimer Candelario in Detroit has shown some things that make you think he's a little bit better than he was. He finished last year very strong. It was a little bit BABIP driven, but he gets to play. He's going to play first base, and that's a team that's doing some things that are kind of nice. I did talk about Hunter Dozier at 50% rostered, hitting 478 over the last 2 weeks with nothing to show for it except for the 478 average, but that's a positive sign. And I do think that Hunter Dozier is better than a 168 hitter, which means that he's probably going to get kind of hot for a little bit to bring his average up in that 240, 250 range, which means there's going to be some good stuff there. And Brian Anderson upon his return from Miami because he's a starter, 11%. He's the other guy. In the deeper leagues, we got Harold Castro. Andy Ibanez of Texas is a guy who's playing all the time. He's the guy that's taking over for – so the Sendo and Nick Solak said that they're going to give him the shot to play third base. He's hit 500 last week with 1 home run. I know it's limited playing time, but it's a guy worth gambling on. Another guy worth gambling on that's sort of been crazy overlooked is Santiago Espinal. The trading of Joe Panic to Miami has created a spot for him. I mean, Espinal isn't much of a power hitter, but he hits well enough to get on base. It's a really stacked lineup in Toronto. He's 3% rostered, and he's a 300 hitter. I think that there's a good chance that in a month we're talking about Santiago Espinal the way a lot of people talk about Luis Arias or those kind of players. I consider taking a shot on Detroit's prospect, Isaac Paredes. He's third base eligible in most leagues, but he's going to be playing second base this time around. There's still Phillip Evans and Asdrubal Cabrera. Asdrubal Cabrera is still waiting for, what's his name, to get traded. Eduardo Escobar for the world to open up for him. I don't really have a big shot. At third base, the only guy I'm really recommending is Nico Horner in the shallow leagues, and in the deeper leagues, I'm recommending Andy Ibanez as somebody that you probably should pick up because the upside there is possible. Hit 20-plus home runs in the minors, has a little bit of speed. But all year long, third base has been the most bereft of any kind of real talent. On the shortstop, second base, it turns out Tampa Bay Rays option Taylor Walls Durham Bulls. We knew that was happening sometime after the call-up of Wander Franco. Elvis Andrus in Oakland dropped to batting 8th. They moved Tony Camp to second. I think that's just for one game. Ramon Laureano is probably going to be back up to the top of the roster, batting behind Canada at the start. Toronto with Springer leading off. Bo Bichette has been batting cleanup. And I'll say that at second base with Marcus Semien. With Springer leading off, Marcus Semien has been batting third. I did mention that I had some worries about how that would play out for all those players. I thought that either both Bichette or Semien would be a loser in the thing. With Bichette batting fourth and Semien batting third, neither of them are really losing, though one of the things that helped prop up Bichette's great year has been the ton of runs that he's scored, which that's going to drop down. But like I said, much like Guerrero had a lot of RBIs, maybe getting some runs knocked in, batting fourth, will give him a really nice end of the year line. In San Francisco, Tyro Estrada is the Brandon Crawford fill-in. I was hoping that they would move Solano in that spot because Losello is coming back. Solano was a shortstop in Miami. He played shortstop for San Francisco whenever Crawford had been sick in the past, been out in the past. But it's hard to get all those guys into the roster, getting to play, especially if Longoria comes back. How do you play Belt? How do you play Belt, Ruff, Wade, La Stella, Flores, Solano, Crawford, Estrada, Vossler, Longoria, and I don't know what the other guy is. A lot of infielders on that team. Miami, Miguel Rojas is batting leadoff. It actually started the week before, but I didn't notice it because of the way that week was split up. And in Texas, Isaiah Kinder-Felipe is back to leading off. Cincinnati recalled – sorry, that's shortstop. So in the shallow leagues, you have Ahmed Rosario is available, J.P. Crawford, Nico Horner, Jose Iglesias. Jose Iglesias on the year, I know I've been talking about him being pretty good all year long. He is 6% rostered. He's batting 283 with 7 runs and 4 stolen bases. It seems like that's coming together as it goes along. He's a guy that I picked up in the one league. He's 54% rostered in NFBC leagues, but he still should be picked up by somebody. Ahmed Rosario is number 1. Nico Horner at 16. Rosario's big calling card is 9 stolen bases. He does bat second in a mediocre Cleveland lineup, but with the stolen bases, you should be able to prop them up. I still don't think Brendan Rodgers isn't playing enough. I don't know exactly why, but 10% in Colorado is too little. J.P. Crawford at 20% is too little in Seattle. In the deeper leagues, you're really stretching a little bit. You're mostly looking for playing time. Cal Castro is 2% rostered, and he does have the good batting average. And he's the fallback option. But I like Orlando Arcia at 37% owned. He had a great 16 home runs in the minors. He's actually hitting in the majors too. But the foolish Atlanta Braves picked up Jock Peterson, which just ticked me the hell off. A guy that was just a couple years removed from nearly a 20-year season, who's gotten healthy for Arizona and getting his time at second base, is Nick Ahmad, 24% rostered. He'd be my number 3 choice. So that goes Iglesias, Arcia, Ahmad. If you want to be sticklers for things, it's Arcia, Ahmad, Jose Iglesias, Arcia, Ahmad, Castro. Jock Peterson is the Yoko Ono of baseball. You know, Chicago had a lot of better options on their team than him. They signed him, keep them from using their better options. The Braves panicked when Acuna got hurt and said, we got to do something. And they got him, and he's blocking. Over time, he's blocking guys that would make more sense to play, like Arcia, like Drew Waters, like Kristen Pash. Anyway, Arcia is better than Peterson. He'll get that through. Most people are better than Peterson. The Yoko Ono of baseball. At second base, we had Cincinnati recalled Eleo Lopez, Texas DFA Nick Solak, Detroit recalled Willie Castro, Philadelphia option Nick Maton. Like I said, Semien is now batting third for them. At Arizona, Josh Van Meter has led off the past 2 games with the Josh Rojas injury. You know, this guy was barely touched in most leagues, but with lead off in Arizona, they can still score some runs even though they can't win games. Miami, Ison Diaz is filling in for Jazz Chisholm, was hurt. Pat Felica, who we'll always talk about, has hit 3 home runs the last 2 weeks, though he's still batting like 190. Andy Ibanez is playing second base, and Brendan Rodgers has not played 3 of the last 4 games, sitting alternately for Rodgers 1 game in Hampton. McMahon, Hampton, Rodgers. I should look at that. I haven't even looked at that today. Anyway, here to open comments. There. Okay. So, second base. Jed Lowry's batting cleanup for the A's, hitting about 260, doing what you expect Jed Lowry to do, 30% rostered. Nico Horner at 16%. Brendan Rodgers at 10%. This is really tough. The only other thing I would say is Bobby Witt is only on 9% of leagues, and we got to think that he's got to be pretty close to being called up with August just around the corner. In the deeper leagues, Rogie Odor is hitting 220 on the year, but he's hitting 279 in July. He's actually been hitting better than you think, 3 home runs. He hasn't been that bad. Tyler Estrada with the playing time thing. Tony Kempbeck getting moved up the roster because he's been hitting a hit for Oakland. Josh Van Meter leading off is an interesting prospect. And Isan Diaz, he hasn't been doing much with Miami, but it's based on prospect power. These deeper leagues don't have the biggest shots you have. Like I said, at shortstop, I actually do like Iglesias. I do like Arcia. And I have the belief that Rogie Odor is what he has. I stopped talking about Jonathan Villar. He's the same sort of thing. He is what he is, and that's good enough in most leagues. At catcher, a lot of things have gone on. Texas DFA John Hicks, who was my starting catcher in one league. I didn't know it till I did this little note here. But Toronto recalled Alejandro Kirk. Atlanta optioned Alex Jackson. Atlanta also outrighted Jonathan LaCroix, which means that Stephen Vogt is their primary catcher, which is the guy I'd probably go pick up. Now, like Minnesota recalled William Astudillo. In Arizona, Dalton Varsho is their primary catcher. He's had 2 hits in each of the past 4 games. Maybe he's figuring it out. I know a lot of guys are high on his prospect, but he looked really bad for a long time. We're 4 games into something that might be a turnaround if he's available and you have space. I don't know if I'd want to start him as my catcher, and I don't know if I really want to have space for a backup catcher. But he's a guy that I might pick up just to hold for a little bit, see if it's real. In Seattle, I talked about Cal Raleigh last week. The guy that's hitting 324 in the minors with some 20-plus home run power. Both he and Luis Torrens are playing simultaneously for Seattle, with Raleigh getting the time behind the plate and Torres playing a bit of DH and a bit of first base. Washington's new starting catcher is now Trace Pereira. His background is rather meek, even though he's been hot of late. I'm not really worth looking into him. I wouldn't recommend him. And Zach Collins is playing close every day for that. We're going to zip through this because it doesn't really care. Dalton Varsho is 24% rostered. He's had 4 home runs, 2 sold base the last 2 weeks. You still have Mike Zunino at 35%. And Alexander Kirk with the Jay Jansen industry is 5% rostered. He's definitely worth a shot. In the deeper leagues, Stephen Vogt, who's been hitting 350 with the Braves, is probably the number 1 choice there. Cal Raleigh, he went 0 for 8 in his first week up. He has hit 273 with a home run in his second week, which is much better. Williams Astudillo is 40% rostered. Probably won't play catcher, but has catcher eligibility. And Zach Collins is getting lots of time with the White Sox. Also bring up Alejandro Kirk there again because he's 59% rostered in NFBC leagues and still be up there. And that brings us to the closers. I'm going to switch back to I don't know. Go through the closer report real quick. Well, I can't do it real quick. The guys that are safe. Matt Barnes had 1 save this week. He's safe. In Boston, Aroldis Chapman at 2, recovering from a little bit of a hiccup in his life. Safe in New York, Jordan Romano has had no opportunities. He's safe with Toronto. Liam Hendricks, no ops, safe with the White Sox. Ryan Presley is safe in Houston. Had 1 with the Angels. Rafael Iglesias saved. He has 2 saves this week. He did blow 1 save. Will Smith had 1 save on the 1 chance. Brad Hand for Washington had 1 save. He did lose a game that came in at a different time. Craig Kimbrell had 1 save. Josh Hader had none. Richard Rodriguez had 1. Alex Reyes had 1 save and a blown save, but he's still safe there. Kelly Jansen had 2 blown saves to start the week, but finished out with a save. It would take a lot more than that for him to lose that spot. Mark Melanson had 3 saves in 3 days, which only means that they like Melanson, but that means they don't like many other guys. You think they'd give him the 3rd day off. The guys that are okay situations are Yimi Garcia was 2 or 2 for Miami. Ian Kennedy had no chances for Texas, but he is the closer. Edwin Diaz had 1 save and 1 blown save. That's an okay spot. He's still a closer. Joakim Soria moves into the situation because he's actually saved his last 3 outings, and he has absolutely no competition as long as he can. If he can convert 3 out of 4 save opportunities, he'll keep that for the rest of the year. The committees, Cincinnati's still a committee, though Keith Embry's got 6 of the last save opportunities, which is better than anyone's done all year long. He's very close to becoming a closer and moving up to the next category. Likewise, Diego Castillo got the only save this week, though Nick Anderson's reacting. That puts Castillo up 15 saves for the year to 4 for the next closest guy. In Cleveland, the needle is definitely trending toward Karinchak. He converted one and blew one this week, and they didn't give Eduardo Clase any chances whatsoever. And Lou Trevino got both save ops and converted both, but he did take a loss on Saturday with a wild pitch. Kendall Graven got both hits off the win. Those are committees that are looking more and more like it's Hembry, like it's Castillo, like it's Karinchak, like it's Trevino, like it's Graveman. So those guys are probably going to move out. That's like the one set of committees. The other committees, Detroit, Joe Soto had 3 consecutive saves Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Friday, they gave the chance not to Fulmer, not to Cisnero, but to Kyle Funkhauser, who missed it, didn't convert. Kansas City, 2 saves for Greg Holland, 1 save for Scott Barlow. That feels completely like a thing. It's amazing how few people will roster Greg Holland. Sure, he has a 4.60 ERA. But he's only pitched 40 innings. He's only going to pitch maybe 25 more. Not going to harm you that bad. In Minnesota, 2 saves opportunities this week. Both were converted. One went to Taylor Rogers, one went to Hansel Robles. That's almost the definition of the thing. In Trisco, 2 ops went to Tyler Rogers. He was 1 for 2. He blew one. Jake McGee converted the other. The problem with Rogers is that they can't give him 2 save opportunities versus the same team, because once a team sees him and kind of gets used to it, he's easier to hit the second time. I don't think he's converted 2 saves all in a row all year long. In Philadelphia, there's no chance this week, but Ranger Suarez wishing to be ahead of Jose Alvarado and Archie Bradley. The bad situations are Baltimore. Tanner Scott blew the save on Wednesday. Yes, a new player got the save opportunity in Baltimore, and he blew it on Wednesday. And then Dylan Tate got the save last night. Dylan Tate. I don't think Baltimore's worth it at this point. And Colorado's also in a situation. Dana Bard had 1 save, and he blew 1 save. The only thing worth noting there is Michael Gibbons is actually, in past weeks, we said there's nobody else that's been pitching effectively. Michael Gibbons has been effective since his return from the injury. Start the year. Other notes: Adam Ottavino blew a save on Saturday, and interesting because they gave Ottavino the shot on Saturday, even though Barnes didn't pitch on Friday, which might signal something about their usage of Ottavino. Chad Green got the save opportunity on Thursday. Everyone's talking about him to replace Aroldis Chapman, but he blew the save. In Toronto, the newly acquired pitcher Adam Simber has pitched more games than anyone else since he's been acquired. He's a bigger part of that bullpen news. I don't think he's fair for the save, but in New York with the Mets, Trevor May got the save after Edwin Diaz blown save. And actually, over the last 2 weeks, Trevor May has 2 saves. Diaz has 2 saves. It seems like it looks more a committee than it actually is. So those are the guys. A couple other notes: Arizona option J.P. Paskauskas, Texas recalled Marcus Evans, Dodgers recalled Brusdar Grudel, in Pittsburgh released Kyle Kripp. So the recommendations are, basically this one's a simple thing. I don't have to tell you much about it. Anyone who has a decent chance of saves is going to get recommended. In the out leagues, Heath Hembry is 46th rostered. He definitely should. He's the number 1 guy by a long way. Gary Soto's at 45%. Joaquin Soria is at 32%. Ranger Suarez at 48%. Pete Fairbanks at 25%. Admittedly, the guys like Bard and Tanner Scott and Dylan Tate are not in that grouping. Now, in the deeper leagues, everybody that's really getting saves is going to be rostered. Even Adam Ottavino is over 50% owned. He's not the closer for Boston. Trevor May is 50% rostered. He's had 2 saves in the last 14 days. That's a speculation for possibly taking over if Diaz falters, but definitely he's a good source of leeching type saves. Greg Holland is the one guy that he's 37% rostered. He is the guy that you would go to. He leads the Royals in saves. Why not pick him up even with that bad ERA? And Dylan Tate has 0 saves there. Then the next question is, who do you pick up as the guys to just in case? I'm not going to just in case Kenley Jansen. I don't know who it would be. He'd probably be on the short-term break league training, but I don't think Jansen's going to lose anything. But number 1 guy, Craig Kimbrell, is definitely going to trade for the Cubs. Ryan Tepera is the guy that pick up there. Yimi Garcia is probably not going to get traded. If he is, he's going to not be a closer somewhere else. So if you have Yimi Garcia, it might be in your best interest to handcuff him with Dylan Flores. At least you have the Miami closer. I give that one about a 10%, 15% chance of happening, whereas Tepera is a guarantee. Or sorry, it's close. It's 80% likely. Close to guaranteed you can in a real rational world. David Bednar is the pitcher, the other pitcher, and that everyone likes in Miami. The other guy would be DeMarcus Evans. Got called. That was the last note. Texas recalled DeMarcus Evans. I actually thought that he's going to be the closer when Texas is out. The reason for that is that if they move Ian Kennedy, and they should move Ian Kennedy, when Ian Kennedy was hurt, every member of that bullpen got a chance to close the game, and every member of that bullpen blew every chance they got while Kennedy was out. The exception being one time Sports got one save. He converted 1 of 3. And it was the very last one after Kennedy was actually back. But he didn't pitch him his first night back. So those are the guys that are in there. So that's it. Conclusion is primary recognitions are Rich Hill, David Price, Patrick Sandoval, Paulo Espino, Brandon Marsh, Andrew Vaughn, Odell Barrera, Jaron Duran, Ben Gamble, Aristides Aquino, Joey Votto, J-Man Choi, Andy Ibanez, Ahmed Rosario, Nico Horner, Jose Iglesias, Orlando Garcia, Gregory Soto, and Heath Hembry. I'll take a quick look into I don't even know where it is. Here it is. If I missed anything else over here. No, that was the last. The Greg Allen thing. The National League. I'm going to talk about one thing real quick. Is it 209? Yeah, because I figure I'll get 15. I had a chance to join a mid-week league, a mid-season league, and it just hasn't gone right for me. If it wasn't for the fact that I was invited by people that I consider close friends, I probably had to walk away from it. But I'm gonna be as positive as possible, and I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use this kind of messed up league to be like the conduit for testing out my theory about pitching pitchers versus bad teams. I'm probably going to move a lot of pitchers around in that league, and actually told everybody in the league, if they're listening, what I was going to pitch right now. So I'm putting up some live things on that, so it'll keep me planning on that. I do have this scrub pitcher tracking, and just things just didn't go right. The couple of rule changes in the middle of the season, and it just Anyway, but I will have a reason for it, so you can expect me to continue to look at that versus scrub pitchers and to track that all year long. Like I said, what I've done so far this year in 2 weeks is 41 innings pitched, 38 strikeouts, 3.03 ERA, 1.13 WHIP, and a K per 9 of 8.22, which is pretty darn good, even with a 3.8 last week. Anyway, Nick Casino's leading the National League in batting average. Michael Brantley is leading the American League, hitting 329 and 328. Specifically, the league leaders in wins in the National League. You have 12 wins for Leo Urias and Kyle Hendricks. In the American League, you have 10 wins for Chris Bassett, Aaron Saval, and Garrett Cole made it up there. We'll give a little bit of a nod to National Leaguers Walker Buehler and D. Sclafini, who also have 10 wins. Remember, these are important stats. The only one to tell you otherwise. They did a pretty good job here finishing up in just about 70 minutes is what I was shooting for. I'd like to thank you all for coming, participating, me talking a little bit about other stuff. Go Cubs. I was a little bit different this week because I actually stumbled into a TV show that I liked, and I kind of got the worst thing about the world in 2020 is we all get to binge watching stuff. And I did spend one night where I watched 3 episodes of Mr. Mercedes. It's a Stephen King thing on Peacock, which is a new service I got. I do recommend the show, but it kind of threw me off a little bit this week. I didn't watch baseball for 2 whole days. How do I turn this thing off? It's this one. And with that, I bid you all a fair and happy Sunday. See you probably at the roundtable on Monday. And I might not make Georgia's night at 6:30. I'll probably be out digging a post hole. Maybe I'll be there for the first 20 minutes, and then I'll go out after 7. Lenny back on Monday at 9 o'clock. We get you covered here on the Legend Network all season long. I'll see you all around. And with that, I say good night.